You've had a rough day when you can't even get your bumper and your commercial right in the beginning.
I love it. I think those videos are the best. I'd like for them to be played every time I come into a room, don't you?
In music, you have to have your own like soundtrack to life too, right?
That's right. Yeah, I'm like my own hype man. I'm my own hype man. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice to meet you.
King, that's what I do.
Yeah, it's like
myself before.
It's like nice to meet you. Here's my video. Watch my video before we meet.
I usually tell people with my intro video before I speak that I made it for Bumble, the dating app. So,
exactly.
But it worked. I'm engaged. We're getting married. So the intro video worked.
Oh, fantastic. Wow. I've been married 30 years. I need I need an intro video now. Can I get one now?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh,
fun.
Yeah. Her and I bickering. That would be the video.
Well, at the end, you just got to raise your hands triumphantly, like, yes.
Even better. I walk around like this, asking her, "Where are my glasses?"
It's happening.
She's like, "Nitwit, you're wearing them." Oh,
it's happening.
Right. That's what happens.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Let's talk about you, lady. This is Game Plan You Today. I'm Rob. You're Jennifer, and we're going to talk about your book, your life, the crazy journey that you've been on.
Yeah.
And how you landed where you are today. So let's go back. Let's go back to the beginning. And let's talk about where it all started, how it began, and how did you end up at IMG Academy? So talk about when you were young growing up.
Yeah, well, as I like to say, before the world began in 1984, for myself, there was my father, and my father was a big-time basketball player. I like to say he was big time. He played in the NBA, played at KU, and he never stopped playing basketball. And you've got 4 kids. I'm the oldest of 4. You know what it is. And when I was old enough and out of diapers, my mom said, "That's it. You got to take one of these kids with you to the park." And he took me because I was potty trained, and I just kept talking to everybody. And he said, "Hey, here's an old racket and a tennis ball. Go hit on a wall and come back when you get 10 in a row." And that's how I started playing tennis, which has led me to chatting with you today.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know your dad or who put the name together, what's your dad's name?
His name is David Magley. He was Mr. Basketball in 1978. He played at KU, played overseas, played in the NBA. So these were stats and things we had to know growing up. There's a quiz at the end.
Right.
We always, super proud of him. But because of that, the first thing he said when he saw me was, "Can you say Wimbledon?" Like that was literally what my dad said to me and greeted me under the planet. And I didn't quite make it to Wimbledon, but I went as far as I could. So it was an interesting moment, the expectation since the moment you're born.
So as far as those expectations, did you know that your dad was famous growing up? What point did you realize that?
Probably wasn't until I was 9 and I was on the cover of the Kansas City Star, and it was a full-blown picture, color, everything. And they mentioned, daughter of David Magley. So in Indiana, sports, basketball is such a big thing. And then to live in Kansas after being an athlete at KU, you're still kind of a thing. So it wasn't until I was about 8 or 9 and I, was starting to get some media, and they would mention my dad a lot. And then he would say, "Oh, one day, they won't mention me at all. And then they'll just talk about you." This was before the internet. So newspapers were a really big deal when you were a kid growing up.
So they did talk about you because you went on to, how's that for a segue, by the way?
Yeah.
So you went to IMG Academy. Before IMG Academy became what it is today, back then in the tennis world with Nick Bollettieri, that was the place. That was the place. If you're a prodigy in tennis, that's where you go. That's globally. So, right? Andre Agassi, Jennifer, what's Jennifer's last name? Capriati.
Yeah. Good memory.
Capriati,
Yep.
And Jennifer Magley.
Yeah. I was so fortunate to just be there on scholarship. Here I am, this kid from Kansas, and I was actually there on a scholarship that was for kids of color. which was really interesting, called Black Dynamics. A guy named Bob Davis, who grew up with Arthur Ashe, started this nonprofit. And that's how I got on scholarship there. Because otherwise, there at the time, I think a private with Nick, a private lesson was going for like $1,000 an hour. And it was like $100,000 a year or something around there to be on scholarship. So in the program I was in. So I was really, really fortunate to be there and not have to pay. That was the best part.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just now starting to make what it cost for me to be on scholarship. A year. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my 12-year-old thinks he's on scholarship on all the food he's been eating in our house.
Thompson.
Yeah, he's been a free ride for 12 years in our house.
I love it.
So, talk about that experience there. Like, what did you find out about yourself through that experience? Like when you went down there and you were the queen of Kansas and the tennis courts there against any 13, 14-year-old and probably older. Then you got down there and world became, whoa, these kids were bringing it. What did you go through in your mind, and how did you mature when you were down there?
That's a really interesting view and a lot of insight that you have. I'd say that the first thing is that when I'm, as a person of color playing tennis, I was just a brown black girl playing tennis in Kansas. And then when I went down to Florida, I became like American, which is really interesting, right? So when we've got this dynamic going on in America, kind of, some would call it a caste system. But at the end of the day, when you step onto that global scene, your nationality precedes your ethnicity. And so for the first time, I'm hearing parents yelling at their kids and cussing them out in French and German and Russian and, yelling at you in different languages. I was used to getting cussed out by other American parents, but then for it to happen in other languages. And it is a humbling experience to think, gosh, I'm so talented or I'm so good. But then when you step onto that world stage, you realize, all right, what my dad was saying was true. There was a Russian girl who was over practicing when I was going to the pool, and her name was Maria Sharapova. So all those characters my dad had made up, in our minds in Kansas to help drive me, they became very real, and I became very American overnight.
That's an interesting thought, but sports is the greatest equalizer with color barriers. There's no doubt about it. And when people don't look at it, because you're still competing, like the field's even. You get on the court, you get on the football field, you get on the basketball court, a tennis court. No one cares what color you are. Could you play?
Oh yeah,
right?
They just want to win.
They just want to win. And can you play? And the character of who you are matters even more so, especially when you play in the team sport. And I know playing professional football, American football over in Europe, our black teammates who are American loved playing over there because it wasn't edgy. The edge was gone for them, right?
It's different. Yeah, it is different.
There was more tension between the Palestinians and the UK than there was with the black American.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They didn't feel the tension. A lot of them stayed over there. A lot of those guys stayed over there and got married, and stayed in those countries because of that. And now what you're seeing is that conversation, I think, is so long overdue for a lot of reasons that, especially in the females. Let's start with females first.
Oh, gosh.
Right?
You see some things. You see some real things. I mean, my dad always taught me growing up, nobody carried your bags in life, because these tennis parents would carry their kids' bags. I mean, I've seen, you have daughters, right?
Yeah.
You have a daughter, right? I've seen a mom put a maxi pad on her daughter's panties in the locker room. Just like they do everything for their kid. I mean, that is the most personal thing, that you have going on and kind of growing up, and their parents are doing it for them. And I was really fortunate that my parents still kept their jobs and worked instead of relying on me as some kind of cash cow to be the family breadwinner, because that happens a lot at the academy. These kiddos, they get, these phenoms, they get contracts, and then their parents just leave the country. Maybe they can't get a work visa, whatever the reason is, and they're with their child, but they have no income. So I was pretty lucky to have parents that were like, you know what, we'll pick up our whole family. We'll move to Florida to support you. And they believed in me. I mean, I don't know if I could say I would do the same thing as an adult now with my kids. I don't know.
Do you feel like when you went to the pro ranks, right? Did you feel like you missed out on anything, or were you so competitive that you embraced that challenge?
Yeah, I feel like I missed out on money. Now, that's the one thing I didn't know. Okay, so nobody told me as a professional tennis player that it would be like being in the minor leagues, but I would have to pay for my own expenses. So if you can put, imagine the baseball minor leagues or even the G League now for the NBA, and those guys would have to pay for everything, that league wouldn't last. So tennis is tennis and golf are those only two leagues that you really do need that solid financial backing to be able to make it. So that's what I felt like, I missed out on if I think I would have had a better shot. And I think most tennis players would say this if they had a little more backing. But socially, do I feel like I missed out on a lot? I do. And that's why I stopped so soon, was because I thought, how am I ever going to get married? How am I ever going to be a mom if I'm in a different country every weekend and I'm by myself? I don't have a coach. I don't have, when you see that player box on TV, you think that's how it's going to be for you. Like, I'm going to have, Anna Wintour from Vogue, and I'm going to have my hitting partner and my coach and my physio. But when you start out, that's not how it is at all.
You got to earn it.
I was clueless.
Yeah, you got to earn it a little bit more. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, you were out there even, raising money for sponsorship to pay for everything.
Totally. I mean, can you imagine if these guys did in any other sport? If you don't win, you don't get paid. It's NBA season would look a little different if you get paid zilch, like nothing, if you don't win. So I think all sports would be different in that respect.
Oh, without a doubt. If it's based on performance and wins and losses, it definitely would. Oh, it would be so
cutthroat.
Yeah, it would be so that and rigged. Everybody would be cheating. Everybody would be cheating.
Yeah. The new gambling stuff. Okay.
So you had to grow up fast, though. I mean, you definitely had to grow up fast and be able to kind of see the world at a different place and different space. And what did you learn about yourself at that time? Were you too busy thinking about kind of that next thing, or did you say, I know about myself, I know I can compete, I know I have leadership qualities, but what deep down inside, I'm a little bit afraid to kind of take that next thing?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's totally that. And I started to associate my identity with my wins and my losses. So it was really hard for me to say, I lost and I'm not a loser. And it was just so hard for me. Every single time I would lose, I think, gosh, I lost, I'm a loser, rather than it's something that happened to me. It was something that I was. And I think that happens for a lot of athletes, especially in individual sports.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. I could understand that. What was that point? When was that point when you said, you know what? Because you never want to be at the point where you stop. Right? There's a point of quitting and stopping, because you really didn't quit. You pivoted. You pivoted over to coaching. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, I realized that it was something that I wasn't going to be able to sustain. And I think the transition is hardest for athletes of what do I do next? If this is me peaking, if this is as good as it gets, what do I do next? And, they say if you're not able to do, you coach. And so then I became a coach, and I coached at Wichita State University. I was associate head coach there. And then I was a head coach at Florida Gulf Coast University in Fort Myers.
Oh, so
for about 5 years I was there.
You had a good run. What did you enjoy most about that transition?
Well, gosh, I was so excited to have the opportunity at Wichita State, and then to become, one of the youngest D1 head coaches, which was incredible to me until my players found out I was only 2 years older than them. They didn't know. Again, social media wasn't a really big thing. And that was a challenge. That was a really big challenge. I was on an NCAA Division I championship team, was number 1 in the nation ranked. And I just thought we used to beat people so bad when I was a player that we would laugh and say, what do they even practice? And then suddenly I was the coach of one of those teams. So that was really a big challenge for me. I would say that we had the highest GPA. We raised the most money. We actually had a win over the Florida football team. We did more community service as a women's tennis team than the whole football organization there. But the one thing that I could have done better is I think I could have shown them that I cared about them a little more. I mean, they say if you get 1% of people that you coach that get you, that's a win. And I probably got over 1%, but I wish there was a way that I could have showed that I cared a little more rather than just having such a high expectation on every level for them to perform.
It's hard to do when you go from being a professional tennis player and kind of, this was your life. And then you're in there with a bunch of college kids who just want to go out Saturday night.
Right.
And you don't I mean, what you went through to get to the level you got, it doesn't just happen by playing, right? I mean, the amount of energy and effort and time commitment and training was at a whole different level. But when you become a coach, you expect everybody to do the same thing and think the same way.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a maturity level of when you're younger and you're 2 years older than them, you're looking at them as you're right there with me. Why aren't you doing this? What don't you see? What,
I hadn't developed any empathy yet.
Yeah.
And even as a coach, I had the same problem, like assuming that they lost, we'd lose. And it was like, oh, what am I doing as a coach? I'm stinking it up. And, it was a time that I don't ever want to go back to.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting experience. And then really the politics of working at a university is kind of what primed me for, the book that I recently wrote. It's like, what do you do when maybe you're hitting all the marks, but you're just not making people feel happy, or maybe you're not filling this expectation of what they expect of you as a female or a woman coach? It's an interesting, sports has a politics about it and an expectation that's sometimes hard to measure when you're coming in from the outside.
Everybody's competitive, right?
Yeah.
Every coach is the best coach. Every coach knows how to do it right.
Right? Just ask them.
Just ask them. Everybody everybody else is cheating.
Yeah.
And every administrator, it's a very hard world from college to pro. You have to have such thick skin to work in the sports industry, either as a coach, as administrator, as a business professional, because everybody's an alpha,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
right? And you're in there with a bunch of dogs, and you got to be able to go. So let's talk about that transition, right? So let's talk about the transition to coach, to business professional, to counselor. I mean, you got a high level engine, and you mentioned it. You wrote a book, How to Be Queen, the Leadership Fable. Did I get that right?
You got it right. Yeah.
Awesome. And you're kicking it. I mean, it's being released now. It's Women's History Month, so perfect timing. Talk about that. Talk about how much of you and who you are is in this book.
Yeah, I will say that before the pandemic, I had a wonderful opportunity to speak, and I get asked to speak pretty often. A lot of keynotes, usually 2,000-3,000 people. And it's something that I have always tried to become better at. And what I've learned is you've got to tell stories when you speak. Well, when the world shut down, I was like, how can I continue to kind of fill out my life's purpose or mission? And that's how this book came about. Is I feel that when you read, it's a version of listening to a speaker because they're getting your undivided attention. So I decided to write, I didn't know it was going to be the most challenging thing I've ever had to do. I've contributed to magazines, I've done all kinds of stuff, but it was really challenging writing a fable. So I rewrote The Tortoise and the Hare to talk about gaslighting women in the workplace. And that is How to Be Queen. It's a story about a young woman who is going at all cylinders in her career, but she's just not getting ahead. Every time she turns around, she's getting, unsolicited advice. For example, speak up. And then when she does, they say, oh, that's a little too loud. And she kind of collapses at her desk and dreams about the tortoise and the hare. And it helps kind of give some clarity of what she should do and how she should see herself, perhaps. So that's a little bit about the book.
What is it that, there's a lot of lessons in that, but real life tools that women can use in the workplace right now, especially young executives, young female executives kind of coming into, especially in the sports industry, how do they manage how do they manage themselves as leaders to overcome drama, to stay away from gossip, right? And then this is across the board. This is men and women. But how do they overcome that to move up the ladder to become a VP and to do all the things that they want to do? What are those lessons?
So the takeaway is not to allow your identity to be defined by anything that someone says or even the actions that you take. So if you're looking to get into that C-suite, rather than being, disturbed that you're not there and, I'm not this executive that I want to be, it's already knowing who you are before you get into this race and understanding that the race is not going to be this even playing field for everybody. There's going to be some obstacles maybe for you if you look different or if you sound different or if you even have a disability. Things are just not, the starting point on the race is not the same. But if you understand that before you go in, the biggest tool, the biggest takeaway is knowing your worth before you ask someone what you think you're worth. So I think that's the biggest thing, is having your identity grounded in something greater than your results, because that's hard. I mean, as you've heard over the last couple of minutes, it's just, that was my big miss, was that I always thought that everything else was defining me and I was judging myself based on my wins and losses. I would say to that young person or that executive, maybe let's not define whether you had a good or bad day based on what happened, but rather what you did. What was your intention? Did you give it your all? The rest is gravy.
Do you find, and this is something I just talked about on a different podcast today, but we talked about realizing that it's never about you. Because I think I know I did. I was definitely victim of this, of taking things too personally, what people said.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And it was like, well, why don't they have more respect for me? Why don't? And I realized no one's thinking about Jennifer. No one's thinking about us.
Oh, no.
Right. The whole world revolves around the people in your office. So what I learned, and I want to hear your perspective on this, when I transitioned my leadership style to a more of a, I work for you, then you don't work for me. I work for you. What is going to make your life easier? And it really started at Disney, because the working there was incredible. And it was one thing that they taught about a leader. It's a servant's mentality.
Right.
And how do I help you get to where you are? I've already been there. How do I get you to that? Because if you get there, then it's going to help me. It's all ships rise. But what advice would you give to young female professionals coming in right now and not taking things personally when they think they're getting attacked in a meeting, in an email, in a conversation? A lot of it's ego. A lot of it is I'm positioning myself for that respect because I don't want you to push me over.
Right.
How do they get around that?
I've seen a lot of work out there about alter ego, and a lot of athletes do this. They create this persona. And I know this sounds exhausting if you're doing it on a professional basis, but in moments of crisis or in difficult meetings, to kind of think back to what does it mean to have an alter ego, that allows us to separate ourselves from the moment and say, okay, Tom is criticizing Sasha Fierce. That's the name of Beyonce's alter ego. They're not criticizing me. So even the best performers in the world have these alter egos so that they can say, it's like an actor having, these stage names. You think the actors' names. Like Lady Gaga's name is not Lady Gaga. So when Gaga gets criticized, it's not Stephanie when she goes home at night. And I think that there's a key takeaway there for those moments where it feels like, gosh, I'm getting attacked, I'm getting criticized. How do I know what is legitimate criticism? How do I know what's gaslighting? And that's a part of it, is being able to have that self-awareness to step back and say, no matter what this guy says, that's not the real me. This is me at work.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at athletes, there's so many athletes that mentally couldn't handle the criticism. Right. If they could have been tremendous athletes, but they could not handle the criticism from coaches or fans or their teammates, and they crumbled because of it. It's mentally, I think that's a big part of it. I know that what I seen in the workplace especially in corporate America, I seen females attacking each other more than they would attack other males. And I found like I think the criticism came from the competitiveness of that kind of that culture, who's smarter, who's prettier, and it seemed like high school. It's like this hasn't changed. That was from my own experience. And I remember a colleague coming up and saying, I have more criticism from other females than I do from male coworkers.
That is so interesting. Yeah. I am amazed when that does happen. And it does happen sometimes also cross race lines. I've been in situations where people that have opened the door for me suddenly decided, I don't know if I should have let you in. It's a hard moment to be able to navigate. But I think going back to one thing that you said that is really helpful is it's hard to find someone sometimes that's been to where you're going. And that is the biggest challenge, is that when you're at work and maybe you feel like the finish line continues to move for you every step forward, it takes a couple, it moves in front of you and you never cross it. Try to find somebody who's already crossed that finish line so that they can leave some breadcrumbs and help support you along the way. And they don't have to look like us. They don't have to look like us. They don't have to sound like us. And they can be an advocate for you. And really, people talk about a board of advisors or a mentor. Just find somebody who halfway likes you and wants to give you the time. You don't worry about the name. You don't have to write them a formal letter. I've seen all kind of stuff out there. But just find someone who you think is a good person somewhere, and they also connect with you. And I think that's really all it takes to not feel so alone on this journey.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I call them my life advisory board.
Very nice. Yes, that sounds. I would like to be on that. That sounds very bushy. I like it.
Go back and rewrite the book and just throw that in there.
Right.
Throw that in there. Yeah, life advisory board. So people have went through life. I had this mentor of mine who was a college football coach for 35 years, just from West by God, Virginia, from Charleston, West Virginia. Just an awesome guy. And he used to say to me all the time, you can no more do what you don't know to come back from where you ain't never been.
That needs to be on a t-shirt. Right.
And he would say it over and over again. And it's like, what? Let me say that. And basically what I was saying, how do you know if you've never been there? How do you know how to act? How do you know what to see? And that old gray hair guy, he always would remind me of those things when I acted like I knew it all. Or I would say, he would say, you can no more do what you don't know to come back from where you ain't never been. So he was a life mentor for me. We talked about, he'd always say, people are going to die. You're going to get people die, you get divorced, you lose your job.
Yep.
And I would always ask him, where's his favorite place he's ever coached? Because he was at, 5-6 different schools in 35 years. And he said, wherever I was at, Robbo. Wherever I was at.
Recruiter. That's a great recruiter right there.
Oh, tremendous recruiter. But his life lessons were more valuable to me about take care of yourself personally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. That carries over. What do you see when you look back at kind of how you transitioned as a human being, as a person, and as a mom? How have you viewed the world? Has that changed a lot for you?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I went from being having a platform of virginity. That was like before I even went to college, abstinence. I was an extreme individual, a young person who was very extreme, didn't have a TV in college, in my dorm room. I just never had one drink at University of Florida, Gainesville, never drank one drop of alcohol while I was in college, to now looking and saying, those were kind of dangerous decisions, because then you don't necessarily know certain things in life. And I guess the way that I've transitioned from who I was is on the other extreme now. Now I'm very much do what makes you happy. I am that person who's on the opposite spectrum of this kind of legalistic rules person. That's not me anymore. I'm more comfortable with the gray. I used to be a black and white kind of person, and now I say, bring on the gray, bring on the unknown. I'm cool with it.
Well, I mean, you were a 4-time All-American for a reason, right?
Yeah, But I'm like, did I have to be that person who would like lock Team USA people out of the room when we were kids because they were so rowdy? I'm like, would I have liked me? I don't know.
Well,
I
now,
was extreme.
yeah.
I guess I'm still extreme.
Well,
So, yeah.
now look at you. I think you just knocked over your glass of wine. That's it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's how you know I'm an old millennial. Is we're getting slack now for getting the side parts in our wine. These younger guys, I guess, are coming after us on Twitter that we're getting millennials. Millennials are old now, apparently. So
Well,
there we are.
Well, growing up, my parents always had that nice box of wine in the refrigerator. So that's when you start nipping that when you're about 12, 13 of this high quality wine. There's only one place. There's only one place to go is up after that. So how do people purchase How to Be a Queen?
Yeah, How to Be Queens on Amazon. It'll be at Barnes & Noble. It'll be everywhere books are sold. And I should mention, it's so short you can read it over a lunch break. I mean, this is a short book. You'll feel accomplished that you read a book that quickly, because I just believe that most things go on too long.
Yeah. Well, my book was 85 pages. I think you can read it when you have it a snack at your desk.
Right.
The letters were like this big.
It'll be a back-to-back. Read Rob's book and then Jennifer's, and then continue on with your day. You know?
Right. Then you got to get off the bus.
Yeah.
So, anything else? Any other final words?
No, I'm just grateful, to you. I really believe that quality knows quality, and you're a testament to that. We run in some of the same circles, and I just appreciate you being willing to share your platform and your spotlight with so many other people in such a positive way. So thanks, Rob. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I mean, Game Plan You was started off of that, connecting the dots with career seekers and founders and, investors and folks that can make a difference and help, and you never know where it's going to come from. So in this day and age, you have all these tools, you have all these platforms, and if you use them in a positive way, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know what's going to happen. The world could open up to you, and you're always one phone call or one text mail away from complete disaster or celebration.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah, that is true. Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So it's been a pleasure. Honestly, the first time I met you, I was like, she's a Spitfire. She's a rock star. I got to get to know her.
This is too fun. I just wish I could have seen you play. I would have loved that.
It's so long ago. I don't even know if it happened anymore.
Do you have any video footage of it?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Oh, thank God for Charlie Thompson. Charlie Thompson. Honestly, awesome. It's hilarious. And my kids, I never put anything up in my house. I never put anything up. So
yeah, my dad had a shrine. So yeah, I never burned candles at his shrine.
I never did that. 2 years later, when for some reason they must have ran out of one of the candidates, and you start getting into like the Hall of Fames, and
wonderful.
So they come and they show up and they hear all these crazy stories that you forget. And they've been part of that. So they were like, "Hey, Dad did really play." I'm like, "Well, I think I did, but."
That's beautiful. I love it. Cool. Yeah. My dad's at home, and anytime I brought a date home, he's showing footage of him playing against Michael Jordan. I'm like, Dad, nobody cares. But then they're like, "Oh no, I want to keep watching this." I'm like, "Oh,
yeah, right." Right.
Like,
yeah. Well, maybe I should have done that.
Yeah. Well. Well, one thing's for sure, it doesn't scare him off. So maybe what you're doing is right.
Exactly. It was great. Have a great evening. Let's stay in touch. Thanks for joining. Go out and buy the book. Amazon. Go look it up. How to Be Queen, a Leadership Fable. This is how stupid I every time I can look down on my notes and make sure I got
perfect.
that right.
It's perfect. You've got it.
Go out and get it. That's Jennifer. I'm Rob. You're watching Game Plan You today. We'll see you next time, everybody. Take care.